Captain America Brave New World is the next installment of the Captain America side of the MCU franchise. This is obviously the first film with Anthony Mackie taking on the mantle after the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, where he was grappling with being a black man, taking on this mantle that a large part of not just the country but the world would rather see him not take on. We've seen that struggle. He is now officially Captain America. He's leading this film. And in this film, we open up with General Thaddeus Ross, played by Harrison Ford after William Hurt's unfortunate passing. He has been elected President of the United States. He's faced some criticism because of how he's handled things when he was a general, especially chasing down the Hulk, but he's trying to turn over a new leaf and try to show that to the people that he is a better man, a more calm, soothing man. But while he is, trying to convince the people of doing that, trying to do right by the country and the world, you have this new terrorist organization, Serpent, led by Sidewinder, played by Giancarlo Esposito, causing trouble. You also have these mind control soldiers on the Secret Service infiltrating the government, trying to kill him. And because one of the people that has been brainwashed is Isaiah Bradley, played once again by Carl Lumbly, this motivates Sam Wilson to investigate on his own whether anyone wants him to or not. I'm not gonna dwell too much on the MCU history, how it started, what led us here, what's been going on since, because there have been many opinions about, where they've gone wrong, why the MCU is not hitting like it used to back in Phase 3, a lot of different takes on what they should have done instead, blah, 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 blah. We'd be here forever, and there's plenty of content out there where you can find people's opinions and different takes on what they should have done. I don't want to waste too much time on that. I also don't want to think too much about the future of the MCU, because while we can sit here forever talking about, what they could have done with the films that have been released, the shows that have been released, the future is a little bit more worrisome as well, with them diving right into their big Avengers Infinity War and Endgame event films before they've properly established a new Avengers team. There's no 2012 Avengers or Age of Ultron to build up the team, build up the world and the drama where we're at now. We're just diving right into another two-part epic, right? That's a little worrisome. There's rumors that there might be a couple solo Marvel films coming out in between those two. Maybe one of them is a Spider-Man film where it's going to take place in this multiverse battle world scenario. I don't necessarily like that as far as the solo films go. And also the fact that, they're going straight to Secret Wars, which is, from my understanding, largely built around the relationship between Reed Richards and Doctor Doom. And we're about to have only one Fantastic Four movie with our new Reed Richards, and Doctor Doom, at the very least, is not going to be a main villain in that. And of course, the big thing that Doctor Doom is played by Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., which is if you're dealing with the multiverse, there's probably a way where you can make that story work, fighting an evil Iron Man. Do I necessarily like that it seems like they're making evil Iron Man their version of Doctor Doom? Not necessarily. That's maybe a little worrisome about the state that they believe that they're in, that they have to do this route. Yeah, I don't want to dwell too much on that. Instead of thinking about their place in the MCU or the implications for what's going forward, I'm trying to take these movie by movie. I'm still very curious to see how that Fantastic Four movie shapes up. And I am curious to see if that can be good. I want a good one in my lifetime, a good Fantastic Four movie. We've only gotten bad ones. And also Thunderbolts, I'm genuinely really ecstatic for, from what they've promoted so far. I really want that to work so bad. It looks right up my alley, and if it disappoints me, I will cry on camera. So all that to say, I was still looking forward to this movie just based off of, I like what they did with the TV show. I like that Sam Wilson was developing more, and I like that he was going to continue to be Captain America. I like that when they initially announced the film, Malcolm Spellman, who was a big, creative force on the show, was going to be writing the movie. And obviously we've gotten more writers since then, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but still, initially, I like that he was involved. And Julius Onah, the director of this film, I know people will focus on Cloverfield Paradox as far as oh, that's a bad movie, why'd you get that guy? But, he's also, that's not a poorly made film. I think a lot of my frustration with that comes from the narrative, but it's a competently made blockbuster. And also Loose, a movie you've probably not seen. It came out in 2019, very underappreciated in my opinion, underseen, great drama with Kelvin Harrison Jr., Tim Roth, Octavia Spencer. So if you get a chance, check that out. If you get one thing out of this video, it's to check out Loose. But that kind of showed me, like, if you give this guy a good script, he can direct, a competent blockbuster, but also really hone in on the drama of it all. So I was hoping for the best, and obviously it's no secret that this movie has gone through some reshoots. All of these movies have, not just MCU, even just like any big blockbuster, especially recently. That's not necessarily the thing that's made people worried. I think it's the details about just how extensive they've been. There's been some downplaying from the Marvel side of things, including director Julius Ona saying like, no, this is like pretty standard. Like, we didn't do like so many reshoots. Like some people thinking they reshot the whole movie like 6 times, and they're trying to say it's not necessarily that. But there are some people saying like, they're trying to improve tone, and other people saying that they have cut major action sequences, that they're just implementing new ones, forcing those in. And I feel like that's led to a lot of skepticism from people. And, I think that's totally fair at this point. You know what I mean? We've seen a lot of movies being Frankenstein these days that don't, work out. I will say, it's an easy thing to start talking about the movie just, going from reshoots, from the filmmaking. They're clearly, from the opening of the movie, they don't do the fanfare. They just show like black and white Marvel Studios logo and kind of just jump right into it. I feel like they were trying to hone in on like the paranoid political thriller kind of like inspiration for this film, trying to hone in on that. And in doing that, they're trying to capture that with like a certain visual, certain ways they have filmed this movie kind of tried to, I think, evoke that kind of style. I don't think necessarily it worked for me all the way through, because it certainly doesn't look like a lot of, regular MCU films, but it also doesn't look like the best looking of the MCU films either. It's kind of like this weird like experiment they tried to do. It almost comes across a bit too like TV like. And I know we last saw Sam Wilson in a TV show, but I was thinking back on that series because I also rewatched it like a couple weeks ago, and I was kind of thinking back to it, and I was like, man, so much of that show, for being, TV budget, they still got a lot of money because it's Disney, but, a TV budget, it looks a lot better than the majority of this film. Maybe all of this film, actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, because there's the way this movie opens. Think back to that incredible opening action scene in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show, where he's flying, he's trying to rescue somebody, and he's flying from helicopter to helicopter, cameras gliding with him. It looks insane. It looks awesome for TV. It's a great opening sequence. In this movie, I think pretty clear the opening action sequence is a reshoot. Just the way they've staged a lot of these action scenes, the way they capture it, filmmaking wise, it's kind of read to me as somebody who has watched a lot of movies, and, not that I'm like a professional expert as far as like picking out specifically, what's been reshot, what's always been there, who can be, unless you actually worked on the film, unless there's actual proof of it, but just, using some intuition as far as like how they've decided to stage some sequences, to film them, some of the fight choreography and the visual effects implemented as well. There is a part of me that is like, ooh, okay, I think this opening action scene is not what they had originally. This feels like a reshoot. There's other parts throughout the film where you'll have some people in an actual set, but then for specific lines of dialogue, they'll cut to Anthony Mackie in front of a green screen, and it's like, I know that's a green screen, man. It does not look like he is in a real place at all, and I guess it also doesn't help that with this like visual style they're trying to adopt, that, trying to still implement that with the green screen shot, that makes it stand out a lot more to me as well. I can't say specifically what was a reshoot or what wasn't, but I think I have a pretty good idea based off of just the filmmaking you're presenting here, and that's not necessarily a great sign. There's some action beats that I thought, were pretty cool. I talked about how I thought, Falcon's flying action sequences in the show were really cool when that came out, especially when he had the shield with him in the finale. And, they do a lot of similar things in this movie. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. Obviously, when he's fighting Red Hulk, which is not a spoiler since they have, fucking put that everywhere as far as the marketing goes. Like, yeah, that shit looks really cool when they're fighting. And, the capturing of Harrison Ford's face on that guy looks fantastic, right? Here's the thing, is that there's still so many visual effects shot. Like I mentioned the green screen stuff. There's parts where they still are utilizing the nanotech mask thing, and the excuse is that, Sam Wilson's costume, his wings, were built by the Wakandans, and Black Panther, they utilize that kind of nanotech stuff all the time, right? It just looks awful all the time. Like there's a shot where Sam Wilson comes up, he's flying down, and his mask fades away with nanotech, and then in the background, the new Falcon, played by Danny Ramirez, Joaquin Torres, he just, like, removes a helmet, and I was like, no, focus on that. Why is he in the background? Focus on that. That looks cool, right? Like, the costume, the practical stuff just looks so good, but then you do, like, some CG, like, bogus shit on top of it, and it's like, fuck, that looks lame. The Thunderbolts trailer, people are looking at, like, Ghost's mask because she presses a button and it, like, retracts, you know? It doesn't, like, you know, the, like, CGI little dots fading away. It's, like, collapsing, and it's like, that looks so cool. It doesn't even look as cool as, like, the Star-Lord nanotech thing. I'm not even sure if in the MCU you'd call that nanotech, but it just looks cooler, right? Because it, like, it builds down. There's a little earpiece where he presses it, and that's where the mask, it just looks cooler. And every single time, every other character has, like, a nanotech thing, a mask, it looks like shit. All the time. It looks so lame. Sorry, rant on nanotech aside, there's still parts where the face for Red Hulk looks great, but there's definitely a lot of parts, you know, showing, like, his hands grabbing something, or the, you know, set around him where it looks like we're in a video game right now, like we are in a completely digital fake environment. Okay, you know, CG artists are taking over, and they've probably been, considering the reshoot rumors, what we do know from visual effects artists who have talked about working on these movies, they might have gotten crunched, you know, to get some of this stuff out. It just does not look great, though. So for all of its good technical qualities, there's also something to, like, counterbalance it. And the counterbalance stuff sticks out like a sore thumb. But you might be thinking, you know, as far as, like, the technical qualities of this, you know, that can maybe be forgiven or lessened a bit if the narrative can keep you engaged. And I will say there are definitely some parts, mostly coming from Thunderbolt Ross. I really enjoyed Harrison Ford playing this character. I will always, you know, think of, man, what could this movie have been if William Hurt got to get to this point with the character. It's very sad that he passed away. I'll miss him. But Harrison Ford does play the part really well, and he's committed. You know, he really sells a lot of the drama and turmoil coming from the character. You know, he does a really fantastic job. Despite the fact that, you know, when they introduce the film, it does feel a little, like, jarring to have that character, you know, be running for president, and he's won, you know, and he's trying to, like, say, like, no, I'm turning over a new leaf. There was a part of me that was like, I wish maybe there was some kind of build up to this, because, you know, last time we saw him technically was an Endgame where he's just kind of at a funeral, and before that he's, like, against the Avengers past the Sokovia Accords, and now he's just jumping to this where he's like, no, I want to rebuild the Avengers now, you know, maybe just some more time with that, maybe just to zhuzh it out a bit more, some work with him in the political field, because they also do a bit of a time jump to the end of his first 100 days. But still, as far as, like, the rest of the narrative, I think that works pretty well, and he is really great at selling it. There does get a point where the messaging, I think, gets a little off, where they start to miss the mark a little bit, as far as, like, I can see you're trying to be a good person, you know, but, you know, you've made a mistake and you need to atone for that, whatever. And it's like, there's a certain thing that they reveal, and I will not spoil it, but there's certain details that they reveal where I'm like, bro, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, this message doesn't really seem appropriate right now, or it just, maybe a different way of going about it. It's a bit too, like, you know, hippy-dippy, everything's gonna work out kind of thing, and I'm not sure how I felt about that specifically. I also think the focus on Thunderbolt Ross kind of detracts from Sam Wilson being the main character of this. Now, yes, he is Captain America, you know, he's leading a lot of the action sequences, you know, he is the hero of the film. But as far as, like, a character arc, I tried to think back, like, what was his journey? Like, what was he learning about? Like, what was he, like, how did his character change and grow? And he didn't. There's one point where they give him a second act low point, but, you know, as I was watching it, you know, he was saying this dialogue, and I was like, man, we've already hit this shit back in the TV show. Like, what I was saying at the start, like, they've already grappled with taking on the mantle, now he is Captain America. But, like, he's going, the second act low point they give him is basically just him going, like, Steve made a mistake again. It's like, bro, what are we doing still? Like, yes, he is technically the lead because he is in the majority of the film. But that being said, Thunderbolt Ross has more of an arc, you know, more of a character journey. So at what point should this just be called fucking Thunderbolt Ross instead of Captain America, because Sam Wilson, despite the fact that Anthony Mackie still does play him well, and some people have pointed out like they're glad that that character is still maintaining like his grief counselor side of him, and you know I can see that for sure. I don't think it's necessarily the strongest thing to say like, well, this character, as far as like your lead character, well, he's consistent. And then that's it as far as like praise goes. It's like you don't want to like you don't want a movie where this character is like challenged in some way or has to face like a big emotional turmoil or anything. It just retread shit we already got. Okay, cool. Awesome. You know, and there's even, you know, watching the movie, you know, there's a part of me that was like picking out the beats. It feels very much so like a rehashed version of The Winter Soldier. Just so much of it feels like, all right, it's slightly different. You know, they've copied the homework, but changed it up just a little bit. But it still feels like a lot of the same movie, but it's not hitting the same because the drama, you know, as far as like the lead character, just isn't there. Another storyline I thought was kind of flat was Sabra. They don't call her that in the movie, actually, sorry. Her character's name is Ruth, played by Shira Haas. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding this character's implementation as well, and some rumors that they've cut down on the role, or no, it was always like this, whatever. I'm not going to spend too much time speculating on that, but I will say that this is a dead-on-arrival new character. Not good, very boring, very flat as well. Like they throw in a line of dialogue where it's like, you know, she's born in Israel and part of the widow program. She's a black widow, technically, an ex-black widow. And that's it as far as like characterization. You know, she works security for the White House. That's it. This is a role that doesn't necessarily need to even be this person from the comics. They could have just had it be literally anyone else. There's another woman who's like close to Harrison Ford who almost seems to have like a similar kind of job to Ruth, and I was thinking throughout, like, could they like combine these characters or something like that, or could they do something a little bit more interesting with it? I was thinking before I even saw the movie, like, could this have been Sharon Carter, because, you know, you still have that loose thread from the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show hanging. You know, it's something you've established, something you could continue. Now that I've seen the film, I'm not sure if that would have worked necessarily, but still, that could have been something to play off of as well. That character overall, that journey was not worth including, not worth the controversy, I would say. Danny Ramirez, who I did like in his brief appearance in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they stick him with like comedic relief, like just typical comedic relief stuff, so he's throwing jokes everywhere, and I like this actor, you know, and he's not awful in this, but there's plenty of jokes where I was like, that's a thud. Ooh. Oh god, you know, kind of like recoiling in my seat a little bit. There's a couple funny moments. Not usually the ones where it's this character just like fucking spitting everything that comes to his mind out, you know? So if this character comes back, I'm all for it, but we need to, you know, we need to work on the writing there a little bit. We need to give him some better jokes and minimize it a bit. Like, we gotta refine this. There are also like a couple like performance moments, where it didn't really come through for me. Like, the emotion of the characters didn't really come through for me. And I didn't know if it was necessarily the actors you were watching in certain parts or the direction or the dialogue, which does bring me to another thing, which is the dialogue. For so much of it, it's like the heads at Marvel were like, you know, we know that there are some people that did not watch a show, and we want to also appeal to some people who might just be going in to see a Captain America movie and they don't know what's going on with other stuff. So there's so much expository dialogue where it's like just spelling out like events that have happened before, character backstories reestablished, just constant exposition stuff where I'm like, fuck, dude, this feels like I'm watching characters just recap stuff, like I'm not watching human beings. And that's where the MCU has really thrived as far as like making these larger-than-life characters feel like human beings. You can hang out with them, you could joke with them, you could be friends with them for real, right? And so much of this is like watching like robots like go to one person and be like, this is guy from TV show, and then recap some events that you learned, and this is a thing from another thing, recap certain other events that happen. And it's like, fuck, man, not even just like recapping from other movies, recapping from the current movie where they're explaining to other characters. Just the way they have written so much of the dialogue is like, yeah, I know, because you don't have to say it because I just saw the scene play out. You need to find a different way so it doesn't feel so repetitive. God, for like the 15 writers that are on, like I'm sure a lot of people would think like, with that many writers, it must be a good movie. It's like, that's not necessarily what that means at all, obviously. God, can we talk about the lame post-credit scene real quick? There's only one. They only do one this time around, but it's one of those where I was like kind of speculating before it was I usually do this with the MCU stuff. I'm like, what could the post-credit scene be? And I was thinking back like, ooh, are we going to cut back to this character who we kind of just just kind of left to the side? Are they going to hint at some other thing that's going on, because we saw this guy earlier, whatever. And then finally, when the post-credit scene rolls around, it's basically just a guy telling a character, i.e. the audience, what they already know, which is, there's more threats coming, you better be ready. And then it ends. And it's like, what the fuck? That was it? As far as like lame-ass post-credit scenes, this definitely goes down as one of them. Jesus Christ. Hey, this is Editing Jackson, doing a box office talk like voiceover, because there is one other small thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't get to, is that because of the nature of these films, obviously there are certain things about the universe that may not be explained right away, or maybe they'll save it for another time, or maybe they just won't touch on it at all. But there are a couple MCU questions that I'm not usually really distracted by when I'm watching one of these films, but I was for this. For example, there's a character that they mention, we'll see them again later on, but they mention really quickly what it is that they're doing, and I was like, what the fuck do you mean? It's one of those characters where it's like, I don't see them at all doing this, but they apparently are. And like I said, when we see them again in another project, I'll let you guess who that is. Maybe they'll have a better explanation there. Right now, it's kind of like, what the fuck? That's a weird thing to just kind of drop in. The fact that this is a Gamma-related storyline, you got Red Hulk, and, the Samuel Stearns is back, but Mark Ruffalo is nowhere to be found. Is that weird? Yes, that is a little weird that he's just not present at all, not even referenced. Well, he's referenced, but I mean, just as far as, like, it's not referenced, like, well, he's away doing something, like, to give an excuse for why he's like not around or not protesting Thaddeus Ross or anyone like that, right? Also, the other thing is, like, we did have a MCU president recently in Secret Invasion, and I'm totally for never acknowledging Secret Invasion ever again. That's the worst thing the MCU has ever put out, but it did have me thinking, like, that ended a bit on a cliffhanger as far as, like, that guy is still in power and he's causing quite a scare with hunting down these Skrulls, whether, they're right or wrong as far as, like, who they're hunting down, right? And this is something that they have not even addressed here. When Thunderbolt Ross takes his acceptance speech, he makes mention to, we've survived being blipped out of existence and a celestial mass coming from the ocean, but they don't mention, and also a previous administration that was fear-mongering, like, no throwaway line like that even. There's no cameo from Dermot Mulroney, no mention of it. So there's still these small little things, when you do take into context with the entire MCU, you're like, what the fuck? you know what I mean? All right, back to the rest of the video. Ooh, voiceover done. Like I mentioned before, there are some good technical qualities that are like trying to bring this up, and other good qualities as well, other than technical stuff. Like the musical score I thought was pretty good. I was surprised by that and noticed it when it started. I was like, this is pretty good. Acting, we've mentioned, there are some jokes that do land, just some, MCU will get you sometimes with some of their comedy, right? Some action beats, there's some plot potential there for sure. Obviously, I enjoyed seeing the carryover, finally getting some resolution with the Tim Blake Nelson, Samuel Stearns character, who some people have tried to avoid saying that he's in the movie, but I mean, they promoted, like, they brought him to fucking D23 and like comic, like the event stuff. It's like, I think people know that he's in it, you know what I mean? I like seeing that play out finally. I enjoyed his presence here. Giancarlo Esposito, he's good for the role he has, which is basically just like the heavy, villain, Crossbones, essentially. We'll see if they treat this character the same way they treat Crossbones in like Winter Soldier to Civil War, but I think there's potential for more, and that could be interesting, especially since he's the head of the Serpent Society. He's got a good, I will say there's that good action scene where he kind of catches Sam Wilson off guard on like this one street, right? It's basically on paper like a low budget version of like the highway street stuff in Winter Soldier, but it works to this film's advantage as far as like, yeah, it's a bit more of like a claustrophobic, closed off kind of action piece where Sam Wilson's caught off guard without his gear and Giancarlo Esposito is pretty damn good at fighting, so there was a good action sequence with him. I was happy to see. So far, it's basically just, MCU Gus Fring, it seems like, is the vibe of the performance, so there's room for growth there. It's once again, as far as like this ongoing franchise thing, it's hard to criticize something if it's kind of intentionally designed to be like, well, you'll see more of him later, but he sure does fit the bill for the part we have for him here. And it's like, whatever. So yeah, there's some other good stuff, but there's just a lot of things about the narrative that really let me down. Post-credit scene, some rush stuff, not every actor hitting their mark, some of the dialogue getting in the way of crafting a compelling narrative or getting you immersed immersed in the scene. Just, you know, certain ways they try to close off the film with their messaging just felt really disingenuous and weird to me. And a lot of the filmmaking behind it is pretty, I would be lying if I said it wasn't really distracting. Like, I was thinking about it as I was watching it. And when you're watching a movie, you know, you either are like just not thinking about it, you're just watching a scene play out, or you're like in awe of what they've done. Like, how did they do, oh my, how, I can't even think logistically how they captured the scene. You shouldn't be watching an action scene thinking like, God, this looks like shit. I gotta give Captain America Brave New World a C-. I was really hoping for the best with this one. I was anticipating it. I was hoping that this could be good. Unfortunately, it really did let me down. I do wonder what a prior version of this looked like before any reshoots. Like, how much worse could it actually be, kind of thing. I do hope that they try to adopt the mentality that DC is going forward with James Gunn. Like, we're trying to, you know, get the scripts done before we enter production. We're trying to be committed to a story instead of, you know, committing to an idea and then being wishy-washy with how it goes about, you know what I mean? I know it worked for the first Iron Man, where they were like, we didn't have a script, you know, we were just kind of making it up as we went along, as Jeff Bridges always likes to say, right? But I don't think that kind of mentality works for everything, especially when it, you know, detriments the project in other departments. Anyways, if you've seen Captain America Brave New World, leave your thoughts in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.